thanks so much for having me out. Appreciate the Informs community and everything that they do, even if it is sometimes letting somebody like me come and talk to folks. And for everybody who's joined today, appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and join here. You probably don't want to see me this big, so I will get smaller and make this fancy screen come up, which I hope you see. And for the next hour or so, we're going to talk about decision making under uncertainty. And I'll share a few stories, a few frameworks. We're not going to get super technical, but I'll try to share a few tools about how we can be more uncertainty aware, and then some ideation, some frameworks for how we can use uncertainty to actually make decisions and communicate those decisions. So boiled down simply, it's how to say, I don't know, without losing your job and sounding like a buffoon. Before we get into fun stuff, I can't pass up an opportunity to talk about myself. So this is me in my most professional business attire. I'm Evan Wimpey. I work a day job. I'm a director of analytics at a place called PyMC Labs. You may not have heard of PyMC Labs, but you've probably heard of PyMC, which is a probabilistic programming language in Python. And so PyMC Labs are just the folks who build and maintain and use that open source tooling and help other folks to use it as well. We'll talk a little bit about that because that's sort of my favorite thing to talk about. But this is a broader talk, more focused about uncertainty generally in the analytics world. I am also a bit of a jokester. 9 to 5, I'm the director of analytics. 9 p.m. to whenever, I'm a data and analytics comedian. I wasn't funny enough to be a real comedian, but I was funny enough of an analytics nerd to be an analytics comedian. So I do like to tell some stats and data jokes. This is one of those like real talks where I talk about real stuff, but I might sprinkle in a couple of jokes. And if you'll recall, there's a Q&A session there. And if anybody asks for a joke, I will not be able to help myself but to tell a joke, including potentially an award-winning statistics joke. It didn't potentially win. It did win an award. I will potentially tell it. Okay. So I'm going to start out with a story. This is a picture of me from 100 years ago, back way before Gen AI. This is a real still photo of me. I was in the Marine Corps, which is a pretty funny pipeline, Marine Corps to comedian. That's not a popular pipeline. But I was in the Marine Corps, and the military, global politics, war fighting is inherently a very uncertain world. Fog of war is a phrase for a reason. But the military tends to demand certainty. They want answers, they want yes, they want no, they want bullet points, and make decisions off of certain knowledge. If you hesitate, if you don't know, that's a weakness. You need to be confident. And so I've got a story. I was a finance Marine. There were other Marines out there like protecting freedom, tip of the spear. I was tip of the calculator. I was not issued a weapon. I was issued an Excel spreadsheet. So as much as you can include me in the Marines, I was a Marine. But I still got to go do fun stuff like go out on the range and fight pretend bad guys. And so one day I'm a range safety officer. I lead about 150 Marines out on the range, and we destroy all the fake bad guys. We won the fake war. It was glorious. We eat our little sandwiches and apples, and we get on a bus to go back to the barracks. And I get on my radio. If you can picture like a 1980s sitcom cell phone, that's what it looks like. And my commanding officer says, "All right, Evan, is the range complete?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Do we have all Marines?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Are you 100% sure?" And I said, "No, sir. And I never will be. I can't be 100% sure." And then he said things that I am not allowed to say on this webinar, or else Informs will kick me out. That is not a satisfactory answer to a Marine Corps colonel to say, "Well, no, I'm not 100% sure, and I never will be." Which is a shame because in an uncertain world, we shouldn't have the expectation to be 100% certain about anything. So, what I want to get at today, the main thesis that I want to get out is we as analytics, data science practitioners, we should not shy away from uncertainty. Uncertainty doesn't mean we didn't do a good job. We don't know what we're talking about. We need to do it better or with a better algorithm or with more compute. Uncertainty is the input. It's what we need to use to make good decisions. That's the Informs tagline, smarter decisions for a better world. We don't make good decisions unless we are accurate in presenting our level of certainty and thus our level of uncertainty. There is risk with presenting uncertainty, but the risk isn't in saying, well, we're not sure. It could be this or it could be that. The real risk, as I see it, and the risk that is out there in a lot of analytics practice, is pretending that we have certainty. Well, here's the model output. Here's what we know. Here's the optimal. Here's what we're going to do. This is the answer. And that certainty comes with it, some level of false pretense that we know exactly either what happened, what is the cause, what will happen, how many, but we almost never know that. I would venture to say that we never know that. There's always some level of uncertainty. And what I would like to implore you to do is embrace that uncertainty. And that will let us make better, smarter, more resilient decisions overall, regardless of whatever your field of practice is in analytics. All right. So it starts with it. It's not easy to do that. I guess absent on the first slide, my premise is that uncertainty and quantifying uncertainty and communicating uncertainty is not the norm. It's not the standard. There are many cases, the majority of cases, where we just gloss over uncertainty, whether we present things that are uncertain as certain, or whether we just ignore it totally because that's the easy thing to do. So why do we do that? There are a few reasons. It starts with this guy. This is a bad guy in the picture. He's I don't know. He's the boss of something. He makes decisions. He's an executive, and he's mean. See that glow on his face? He's mean. He doesn't want to waste time with context or nuance. He wants presentations. He wants an executive deck with a bullet point, a number. Here's what it's going to be. Here's growth. Here's forecast. Here's the accuracy level. We don't have time to talk about uncertainty. That's going to get punished. We want confidence. We want presented with what we know, and everything is incentivized to do that. The leaders, the business units that are reporting up to leadership, they're incentivized to report a number, an accuracy, a metric, and it's much harder to convince people to accept some understanding of uncertainty. Not necessarily unique to analytics, but across the human race, there's a psychological discomfort. It's really difficult to express that you're uncertainty, to express that you're uncertain. We often, even subconsciously, equate uncertainty with incompetence. People say, "Well, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be," and certainty signals confidence. It's this person knows what they're talking about. They know what they're doing. They did the analysis. They've ran the numbers. They built the model. They know. Versus somebody who comes in, well, we don't really know. We think it might be this. There's just a psychological discomfort with both expressing that, with communicating that, and with receiving that. Even if you know inherently that there is uncertainty in some prediction, some model output, it's really hard to hear someone talk about, well, we don't really know exactly what it's going to be, but here's what we think. And then the third thing that I think is key, and I think is the most unique to analytics and organizations that sort of lean on analytics, is this sort of organizational myth that because we're data driven, we know things, we know answers. The more data we have, the more we absolutely know an answer. And that can help us. Data can absolutely help point us to better models, better predictions, better causal understanding. But data can also tell us how well we know it, how much we know, and how much we don't know, and can help quantify that. So just because you're data driven or because you have a great analytics team doesn't mean that you've eliminated uncertainty. Uncertainty is endemic to everything that we do, and being data driven doesn't erase that, doesn't mean that's not true. Okay, this is a timeline of everything that has ever happened in analytics. These 6 things are what's happened so far. There might be more to come. I'm not certain. um, but these, no, there are obviously a lot more, but I've tried to distill down why it sort of hasn't always been this way. Uncertainty is has a home in statistics. Um, I'm sure there's cases, before the 17th century, but I think it's a fun one. Pascal's wager. Pascal was a mathy guy, did numbers and stuff, but he was also a bit of a philosopher. And his wager, if you're not familiar, was whether or not we should believe in a God and practice our life like there's a God. And he thought about the risk and the trade-offs of what if we believe and there is no God? What's the cost? Well, we try to live a better life. But what's the risk if we don't believe in a God and there is one, and then we spend eternity in, torturous hell? So Pascal was thinking about the trade-offs. There's some uncertainty in whether or not we believe or not. I don't know if he's burned at the stake for that. I don't know, but Pascal's wager is a famous thought experiment about understanding uncertainty and the sort of the trade-offs on the decisions that we make because of that. And then in the 18th century, we have my hero, the great Reverend Thomas Bayes, who it was if you've heard of Bayes' theorem or Bayesian modeling, Bayesian inference, it's credited to this man. And really, he thought about how we understand, how we make inferences about the world, what we understand, and the data that we collect. And in the Bayesian methodology, its uncertainty is a first-class citizen, is what is part of Bayesian modeling, is what it gives us naturally out of every Bayesian inference that we make, is how certain we are. We have a full picture, a full distribution. And that was really the part of Bayes' theorem that makes it Bayes' theorem, is that everything is sort of distributional. There's some uncertainty about it. And early frequentist statistics as well, with Galton and Pearson and Fisher and all the bad guys. Just kidding, for my frequentist friends. But the statistical tools that they pioneered and frequentist testing, inference testing, it all comes with ranges and confidence intervals and estimates. And so uncertainty was really a part of all of early statistics. It was important. We realized it was important. But then we got more powerful tools, and it meant uncertainty took a bit of a back seat. And so, not to cast any blame at informed, but really the operations research, the optimization world is such a great tool for being able to make smarter decisions. But most optimization systems, if we're trying to optimize for something, for some return, for minimizing risk, maximizing profit, whatever it is, that optimizer needs some types of inputs. And it's a lot easier to optimize over certain point numbers as inputs than it is squishy confidence intervals, distributions. That's a lot harder. It takes a lot more computation, and it takes sometimes we have to sort of approximate the way we do that. So with this sort of industrialized first decision sciencing, we need to collapse all those statistics with uncertainty into points, because with those points, a forecast, a number, a metric, then we can optimize for the decisions we want to make. And then maybe a little bit of a tangent, but I think a big driver of why uncertainty is so overlooked today is the Excel and PowerPoint world that we live in. Excel, we stack the numbers in. Sure, we can express uncertainty, but often we don't. We've got a spreadsheet of reported numbers. In PowerPoint, if you've taken any type of business communications class, you've probably heard, one slide, one point, a bullet point, keep them short, keep them brief, make your point. Here's the bottom line. And it's a lot easier to do that if you push uncertainty off to the side and just present, here's what growth will be next quarter. Here's how many widgets we're going to sell. Here's how many employees AI is going to lay off, in the next decade. And PowerPoint sort of naturally lends itself, and the PowerPoint presentations, to just ignore the uncertainty, give us the bullet points. And then that leads even into modern machine learning. If you're in this call, if you're a practicing data scientist, analyst, you've built some type of model, it's probably been an XGBoost model, let's just be honest, and you've probably used a point estimate that came out of it. Here's our forecast, here's our prediction, here's what we've got. And modern machine learning has let us be very, very powerful. And we've collected a lot more data that gives us much better predictions coming out of these models. But by default, most of these are completely silent on uncertainty. And just because we've got a lot of data and just because we've got really powerful algorithms doesn't mean we know for certain how many widgets are going to get sold next month. There's some uncertainty there, and modern machine learning tends to brush it off to the side. So this is everything that's ever happened in analytics. I want to get to a real world story. This is based on a real world story, but I'll take some creative liberties with expressing it here. So people, they're eating chicken nuggets, and there's a big chicken nugget problem. You see, you, dear listener, are an analyst for your favorite fast food restaurant, but you're a junior analyst, and so they've got a million, billion, trillion stores. You're only concerned about two stores. There's two locations for this fast food restaurant, and you work in their logistics and supply chain. And what you've got to do is forecast how many chicken nuggets are going to be consumed in demand at each of the two stores over the next month. Well, great. You've got all the machine learning tools at your disposal. You built a fancy forecasting model. You used the latest and greatest, and you've got the data, and you've built these forecasts. And it says store A is going to demand 90 chicken nuggets, and store B is going to demand 90 chicken nuggets. And so, sure, that's your analytics tool. That's your analytics problem that you're solving, but that's not the actual problem you're solving. The actual problem you're solving is decision support, a smarter decision. So what decision are you trying to make? There's probably a lot: marketing, coupons, pricing. But one of those decisions is going to be, how many chicken nuggets do you send to store A and store B? And your forecast of 90 chicken nuggets at store A and 90 at store B, it gives you a starting point, but it's very incomplete. It does not help you make the best decision on, hey, distribution center, send this many to store A and send this many to store B, because we're left without a big piece of that. And that's how uncertain we are about this. So I know it's a very confusing problem. I've drawn this map to make it easier. We've got demand of cases. This is, we'll just assume this is for the next month out. And boom, store A is blue. Yes, I said that right. Store B is orange. And we're forecasting 90 for both. That's our point estimate for both. But what if we used some modeling techniques, some analytics, to not predict, not forecast just a point estimate, but to put some uncertainty around that? Now, in this case, we've got a full distribution. Here's what we think for store A. Now, the mean, the most likely case, we think is 90. We think the demand is going to be 90 for next month. Same as store A, same as store B. But these are very different distributions. Store A has less uncertainty and it's symmetric. We're about as confident that it would be 80. It's about as likely that it would be 80 as it would be 100. Where store B, it's probably more likely that it would be 80 than 90. But we've got this long tail. It could be 120. It could be 140. If the home team wins their soccer ball match, then everybody's going to run out and celebrate with chicken nuggets. So it could be much higher. We're more uncertain with store B. So now we still can't quite make a better decision. There's still a key piece of information that we need to be able to make a decision here, because we don't know what happens if we get it wrong. We're just a junior analyst who built a cool forecasting model. So, but now that we have this gives us the tool. This gives us the ammunition to learn from the business, to ask the right questions from the business, and to make these smarter decisions with uncertainty awareness in our risk and our trade-offs. So the actual decision that we need to make is not a better prediction. We're not, well, okay, we said 90, throw more data at it, develop a new model, hire a new data scientist that knows more about forecasting. Those things will help. A better point prediction will probably help you make a better decision, but we're not focused on just a better prediction. We're focused on a better decision. And for that, we need these three things, and these three things only come if we are clear and honest about what we know about uncertainty. So the first thing is the possible outcomes. It's not just the demand is going to be 90 next month. It is what could happen. And so I'll go back and forth between these slides a little bit. And what could happen at store A? Well, it could be between about 70 and about 110. And we're much more confident that it's going to be somewhere here between 80 and 100. What could happen at store B? Well, it could really be anywhere between 50 and 150. It's not just what could happen, it's how likely they are. We want to know some probability. We want to be able to quantify how likely they are. And store A, we have a much more mass of our probability is here between 80 and 100. Store B, that's spread out, a lot more volatile on that prediction, even though the point estimate of 90 is exactly the same for both. And then step 3, this is often the place where the analyst, with all the tools and all the data and all the compute, will still need some help from the business, from the subject matter expert, from the context awareness, or what are the costs and what are the benefits. So what happens if in various scenarios? So if we supplied 90, what happens if the demand is only 80? Well, we've got 10 extra cases sitting around. Maybe they go bad, we have to throw them out, we have to discount them and sell them cheaper. And the counter to that, what happens if we supply the store B with 90 cases and the demand is 100 cases? Well, the last 10 folks that come, I guess not everybody orders a case, after 90 cases are all fried up and sold, then the next few people are going to come and order chicken nuggets at the restaurant and be told, I'm so sorry, we don't have any chicken nuggets, we've sold out. So that is a very serious cost to getting this prediction wrong. And if all we have is, well, we expect 90, okay, great, we'll send 90 to each, we're not making the smartest decision that we can make there. And the only way we're able to make the smart decision is not just with a point estimate, but with being honest and transparent about the uncertainty that we have. So the decision maker, the logistics manager, the supply analyst, whatever, that says, hey, distribution, send this many. They don't need, I said here, they don't need a crystal ball. They would like a crystal ball. If we had some type of forecast that could honestly predict the future with certainty, then this presentation is moot and you don't need it. And the crystal ball would be great. I shouldn't have said they don't need crystal balls. They're not going to get crystal balls, is what I should say. What they need, that they can reasonably get, is well-characterized uncertainty. So something that honestly represents, given the data and the context and the knowledge that we have, how sure are we about this number? What are the possible outcomes? How likely each of those possibilities are? And what are the risks? What are the costs and the benefits? And that's what helps you make a smarter decision. All right, you're convinced, you're sold, you're never going to run an analysis with just a point estimate again. But great, what do you do? How do you do it? There's a few things, there are dozens and dozens of things that are possible here. And there may be many of you that are joining this call and you don't present just a point estimate and your boss doesn't ask for just a point estimate. And there are many more things that are on this list, but just a few to start. The first, thanks to Reverend Thomas Bayes, we've got Bayesian modeling, where the outputs that come out of this model is not a point estimate just by nature. It's a full posterior distribution that can give you these first two things that you need, all the possible outcomes and how likely they are. And Bayesian modeling also gives you all the assumptions that go into your modeling framework for this. So if you've got people that are challenging the assumptions, which is great, or in different assumptions, what are the different possible outcomes and how likely they are? If you're beholden to your scikit-learn and your XGBoost model, you can do quantile regression. Oftentimes, it's not just the mean that you want. Maybe you want to make a decision at the very tail. What's the 95th percentile outcome of this? And quantile regression, with whatever modeling type you choose, you can do that and model at the 90th quantile or the 10th quantile rather than just the mean. And then that's the modeling tool that can give you the output that expresses uncertainty. But ultimately, since we're trying to make decisions, we've got decision tooling that we want here too. And so there are an infinite number of ways to think about this, but two things that I put up here that I think can be helpful in the way you want to present this. One is value at risk, which is a way to quantify sort of the downside exposure. And oftentimes this is at 5%. So at the worst 5% of cases. So at the 5% tail, the most extreme 5% of demand, uh, if we send this much, we're going to run out of stock, 3% of the time. Or if we stock at this amount, we're going to run out of stock, in 1% of the cases. And that can help decision tooling. So where maybe somebody says, we never want to run out of stock. Well, that's tough. Maybe we want to run out of stock less than 0.5% of the time. A full distribution output from your model can say, if you want to run out of stock less than 5%, less than 0.5% of the time, you need to stock at this level. That's great. And you can quantify, well, we expect to have to throw away inventory, an average of $1,000 in inventory a month, but then we won't run out of stock. It also lets you do scenario planning, which is a phenomenal communication tool if you're trying to help a business lead as an analyst, if you want to help your team, your business, your organization make a smarter decision, then giving these scenarios, well, under this scenario, here would be the outcome. And that's basically a sampled point from your distribution. If the demand is here this month, here's what would happen. Here's what we would see. If the demand is here, here's what we would see. And we can quantify how likely each of those are. And so these, given your modeling output that has some uncertainty built in, here's what helps you make a decision. And the example that I keep coming back to with the chicken nuggets, you can map out in your own head whatever the problem that you're trying to solve, the decision you're trying to support. Almost certainly, you need to express some uncertainty in that to help make these decisions. Okay, and another plug for Bayes, because the modeling tools a lot can give you specific quantiles, specific confidence intervals, but with Bayes, we get, with a single model, we can get the full distribution, which lets us look at any quantile and any scenario within that output. And as we change our decision rules, okay, our service level needs to increase, or okay, we need to really cut costs, so stop wasting stuff. Whatever the decision rule is, the one model with the one output can help you support that. And that's the power of Bayes there. Okay, how are we doing on time? We're doing okay. This is not meant to be a full class on or a full webinar on how to do Bayesian inference, but I do have this plot in here where this is not actually output from a Bayesian model, but it's meant to help showcase what a Bayesian model can do and how it helps you model uncertainty to make better decision. So what we've got here in blue, this is store B. Maybe store B was a brand new store, and we're trying to forecast how many cases of chicken nuggets we're going to need next month. And if we have no data on the store, do we have no information? No, we have some information. Maybe we've got competitor stores in the area. We've got stores that are in sort of a similar area. We've got the closest store. So maybe we have some idea and we can map it to this prior where we think, yeah, it's probably around 90, but we're not really sure. It could be really low. It could be really high. We don't know much about it. And as we collect this data, so the green is going to be our observed, maybe week over week, we just observe and we see data that looks like this. Well, collecting data helps us learn more, helps us narrow that uncertainty. Now, it's never going to go away. We're never going to have our crystal ball that tells us this is exactly how much will be in demand at the store over this month. But the more data we collect, the more we know, the more confidence we have, the tighter our level of certainty is. And so we can end up with something like this that is red. We call it in Bayesian inference, we call it the posterior. So we can see this is a much smaller distribution. It's a bit tighter. We're more confident now that it's going to be in this sort of smaller window. And as we collect more data, we'll probably see that get tighter and tighter. Of course, if we collect a lot of months at 0 and a lot of months at 300, then maybe this is going to spread out wide. And that's the nature of this store. It's very volatile. We just really don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty endemic in this store. But Bayesian inference gives us this straight directly from the model. It gives us this output distribution that we can use to feed into our decision-making process. Okay, that's all great, but we got it. We can build these models. We can build these tools. We can use these tools to build these models, rather, and get these fancy uncertainty. But I still got a boss, and a boss wants to make decision, and he doesn't or she doesn't want me to come in and say, well, I don't know. So how do we do that? How do we say, I don't know, without losing our job or without foregoing a promotion or foregoing a positive performance review? Well, the first step, this is sort of cheating. How do you say, I don't know, without losing my job? Well, first step is to not say, I don't know. You just don't say, I don't know. We've got better ways to communicate. And uncertainty should have no correlation with lack of confidence or lack of knowledge. We can very confidently say, here's what we know, and here's what we don't know, and here's the decision that we recommend based on that. So we can be clear and confident when we express our uncertainty. That's not always in sync with the human psychology and the way we feel about uncertainty, but uncertainty does not mean a lack of confidence or a lack of understanding. We do the analysis, we have this measure of uncertainty. And we want to frame it. Uncertainty is a tough word. I don't know is a terrible word, but if we think about risk management, that's a language that business decision makers, whatever the frame, whatever the business vertical is, risk management is a language that we all speak. And so I'm quantifying the risk sounds much better than I don't know, I'm uncertain. Here's the risk. Here's the risk in the 5% of worst cases. So even if they mean the same thing as here's our uncertainty, here's our prediction interval. Quantifying the risk is speaking in the language that the decision maker understands and the language that the decision makers need to be able to make the best decisions. So we want to use that decision language, the model outcome, the if you ever catch yourself saying posterior distribution to a business leader who's trying to decide how much stock to send each store, that's probably not the right language to use, but replacing that type of modeling jargon with actual outcomes and actual trade-offs at this uh, um, at this level of that, if we distribute this many cases in less than 0.5% of the time will we run out of stock, and only in 10% of the time will we have to will we have to lose inventory due to spoilage. If we can communicate those as trade-offs that the business understands, then they're much more receptive to the language of uncertainty that exists no matter what. Whether we frame it with this language, the uncertainty in our modeling is always there. It's just to make sure we communicate it in a way that helps the business make a clear risk-aware decision. So the uncertainty is not weakness. It's not a bad model. It's not certainly not a bad analyst. It's honesty. It's honesty in what we know. And if we frame it properly, that helps us build trust with the decision makers and helps them make smarter decisions. All right, great. So we got the answers. We know how to build models. Well, we don't really know, but we know some things to Google so that we can build models that are uncertainty aware. And we can practice communicating those. And now we have these lessons learned. We're going to go back in time to when this is me, a young Marine, and I've got Marines loaded up on the bus. We're ready to come back to the barracks after a long day shooting fake bad guys. And my boss says, Evan, are you 100% sure that we've got every Marine? Now, remember what I actually said was no, and I never will be, which is not the right way to do it. What should I have said? Now, I realize that you can't come off mute, but just go ahead and talk to whoever's in the room next to you. What would you have said? Now, maybe you could have said something like this. Sir, we've done check A, check B, check. I've done a personal head count. We've done a squad count at the squad leader level and down, and we're as confident as we can be. We understand the risk, and there is no tolerance for a Marine that is left at the range. And we have done these checks, and we are confident that we are ready to head back to the barracks. Now, if we said something like that, risk awareness, acknowledging what we've done and acknowledging that there's not admitting that there's 100% certainty, then I think a reasonable Marine would come back and say, yeah, but are you 100%? Because that's just like what the Marines do. And that's maybe a bit of a discouraging way to close this. But oftentimes, I think that's what you'll find is you'll find leadership or decision making. Certainly, probably the more senior you get, the more intense and heavy decisions have to be made, and the more innate desire there is for some certainty around those decisions. And so, if you do your best to communicate some uncertainty and the trade offs on the risk, and here's the recommended piece of action given the data and the model and what we expect to happen, you might get a, yeah, but what we want to know the answer. With certainty, what is the answer? How many chicken nuggets are going to get sold at this place next month? How many people are going to apply to this job? How many people are going to respond to this marketing campaign? And so if you do your best to communicate that and you still get that pushback, then um, we're always open to your resume. Go ahead and send it to me. We're looking for folks who can communicate uncertainty with confidence. And I say this not to be discouraging to the analyst or scientist on this call, but I hope there are decision makers on this call too, or decision makers can be aware of this framework so that they can be more comfortable with uncertainty, and we can better match the communication of an analyst that is able to express those in terms of risk and trade-offs, and a business person who's trying to make a smarter decision and can be aware that there is no certainty that comes out of an analytics model. Okay, there are a few resources. PyMC, if you want a model that gives you a full distribution of output, PyMC is a great place to start. If you want some backbone behind Bayesian modeling, Richard McElraith's Statistical Rethinking is the absolute best, most accessible book on it. There's a couple of other books that I think are good about how we think about uncertainty. Thinking Fast and Slow is great. Sam Savage, The Flaw of Averages is probably great. It's been on my list of books to read for as long as I've had a list of books to read, but I haven't read it. But people say it's good, so maybe it is. And then if you like to laugh at data science, then yours truly has written a book called Predictable Jokes. There's no uncertainty in that. It's just a bunch of jokes. There's uncertainty in whether you will laugh or not, but I feel pretty confident that you will. Those are all the slides. Those are all the slides. How about that? We got plenty of time to take some questions.
Great. Thank you, Evan. That was wonderful. I'm certain that everyone enjoyed it. First of all, I think that we have to hear the award-winning statistics joke before we get to any of the other questions.
All right. I would let's see. Did you hear about the Bayesian, or all Bayes? Did you hear about the Bayesian that built a model to tell her when she needs to go to the dentist? Wow. It said she didn't need to go for 6 months, but that's probably because she just had a week prior. This is not an uncertainty aware joke. This is a in the weeds Bayesian joke. Hey, it won an award. As my previous boss would say, was there anybody else who submitted a joke to that competition, Evan? But it's an award winner. So there we go.
Great. So we have a question. How do you feel about scenario models like low, medium, and high for working with the business to make uncertainty easier to understand?
I think that's phenomenal. Any way that you can communicate to the business that this is not a dead set, this is not the answer, there's uncertainty. I think it's our job as modelers and planners and decision support to sort of tease out what does low mean. Is low the 0.1% lowest? Like how extreme is that tail risk? Or is it the 10th percentile, the 50th percentile, and the 90th percentile? And if we can sort of understand, even if it's not quantitative language, if we can understand a bit qualitatively, sort of how much do we care about those really extreme outcomes, then yeah, absolutely, that's a great way to do it. Sort of here's a low, here's a medium, here's a high, and an easy way for people to consume uncertainty. Okay, we're aware that we don't know the answer, but we've got some idea of the range, and if we can put some percentage or probability on that, then that makes it even more powerful. So yeah, I think a great tool.
Great, thank you. excuse me, in the modern era where everyone is following AI blindly, people are preparing things using AI and no one really cares. So would it be harmful in the future, or else or else we should ignore the prior methods too? Is AI controlling everything, even in the old pattern of data analytics? What's your opinion on it?
Yeah. I use AI all the time, every day, and I love it, and it's great. And I think it's a much more powerful tool when you can be uncertainty aware as a consumer of LLM output. Uh, Goodness, I will look for this. I wish I would have had this resource on here. There's a really cool Python package that lets you use these open models and as LLMs, text generators, and it shows you for each next token, it shows you the probability of each token. So let's say we're in the middle of you ask an LLM a question, how many days are in February, and it generates a response. Well, in most years, for each next token, it shows you a probability distribution. So maybe it was 90% in next, the next token would be 90% years, 0.1% Omaha, 0.3% whatever, Fandango. And so we can just see, okay, it's very confident that that is the output. But just having some awareness that the AI generated output sort of distills that uncertainty in token prediction down to, well, we're not giving you that. We're just giving you a token. Here's what it is. Here's our best guess. Good luck. It lets you, I think, it lets you as a consumer of AI naturally be a little bit skeptical, knowing that that uncertainty is getting squashed down into just, well, here's the output that came from it. And if you're using AI in your world to help build a model, to help build a chat bot on your website, if that's your initiative, well, find something else. Yeah, I'm sure it's a great initiative. I'm sure all your customers will appreciate it. But just being aware that that uncertainty is getting squashed and what risks come with that. Well, we're not. It's harder to make risk-aware decisions. Then I think that that knowledge lets us be better stewards of using AI. But I don't think it should mean, well, don't use it because if we're not clearly representing uncertainty, we can't use it or find value out of it, depending on the decisions we're trying to make or what we're trying to output, then it can be super helpful.
Great. There's a couple in the chat here. I don't want to miss either. How, if at all, might this expectation about communicating uncertainty vary depending on what level the data scientist works at within the org, and in the case of perhaps reporting to different business groups?
Yeah, that's a great question and very practical. Um, this is not a hard and fast rule, but my intuition, based on very limited data, is that sort of the lower you go, the more freely you should be able to talk about uncertainty. If you're a data analyst and you're reporting to whatever the senior analyst on your team, you should talk explicitly about here's the outputs, here's the assumptions that we made, here's a distribution of outputs, or here's the 90th and the 10th quantile. How do we present this? How do we help support a decision on this? Versus if you're a senior leader and you're presenting to a COO or a CFO on here's the investments we need to make. You've sort of already got that business context and those trade-offs baked in based on here's the organization's priorities and here's the risk appetite, and you might be able to get away with presenting here's our best course of action, and you've got the analytic work that is behind it on we are uncertainty aware and here's why we recommend this action or option or decision. But generally, the higher up you go into an organization, the harder it is to paint a full distributional picture with all the possible outcomes and all of the risk. But the more the overall organizational risk appetite and trade-offs is clear, and so your analytic output can go ahead and support a decision given that assumption. That's a tricky answer, and it also depends. You may get some small teams where the CFO was a data scientist 5 years ago, and you can be very explicit about uncertainty there. But that's probably not the case at a Fortune 100 company.
Do you expect the client to say they don't want to run out X% of the time?
Yeah, that's if you can get a question like that answered explicitly, that helps you make a decision support right away. Oftentimes, you're not able to get an answer like that, and you've got to sort of tease out and make an assumption about the answer. I had a project where we were modeling. Actually, I think this was in academia back when I was in grad school, but looking at offering loans to people, and there's some risk that an applicant will default on their loan. And so if you had a perfect predictive model with no uncertainty, then you could say, okay, well, offer the loan to the people who will pay it back and don't offer it to the people who won't pay it back. That's easy, but it's not that easy. There's uncertainty. Everybody, we don't exactly know. And so a question that has stuck with me for over a decade now that I absolutely love is how many good loans does it take you to pay for a bad loan? So if you make 10 good loans and receive the interest payment, does that cover one bad loan? And it's not always that simple, but that type of framing to a business gives you an idea of what those trade-offs are. And so maybe they're not going to say, well, we want 5% of loans to default. But if they say it takes X many good loans to, to pay for X many bad loans, then we can optimize based on those trade-offs. Now, it might not be purely financial. There's almost certainly more complexities there. Maybe we grow our market for other financial products if we offer a few more loans, even if there's a few more defaults. But trying to ask a question in the business terms, it oftentimes can't be as blunt as, well, how often do you want to run out of stock every month? Because if you ask a question that bluntly, the answer is usually never. How often do you want to run out of stock? Never. How often do you want to have to throw inventory away? Never. Well, there's a trade-off there, and understanding the arithmetic behind what that trade-off is helps you support a smart decision.
All right, back to your crystal ball. To what extent do you use graphics, distribution, or CDFs to express uncertainty?
I work for a company called PyMC Labs, and we are the Bayesian consultancy. And so almost everything we do is Bayesian and distributional focused. So the people who bring us in usually want to see a full posterior distribution, and we usually show that to people. And at some point in the org chart, you have to get away from a distribution and get to a bullet point. Maybe it's in here's based on these assumptions, here's the decision that you should make. But I think distributions are great. I gave this long preface just to say I'm also extremely biased in that I'm comfortable looking at distributions, and I'm usually chatting with folks that are also comfortable looking at distributions. At some point, maybe it's the low, medium, high. At some point, maybe it's in the worst 5% of cases, or the most pessimistic or most optimistic 5% of cases. Here's the type of output that you would see. Um, but I think if we as analysts can get comfortable with distributions, that gives us the most power and flexibility to slice it or dice it however we want. If a stakeholder wants to see low, medium, high, we can show that. If they want to see what's the worst 10% of the worst 10% of months, if a really bad month happens, what will the outcome be? And a distribution gives us the flexibility to answer any of those questions.
Thank you. How do you incorporate these ideas in the very complex decision cases where optimization shines, such as factory scheduling?
Yeah, I think going back to my brief history of all things analytics, the most complex optimization problems still gloss over uncertainty, and stochastic optimization that takes distributions as inputs is hard. There are ways to do it, and there are great ways to do it. But when we talk about trade-offs, sometimes the trade-off is it worth understanding? Is it worth incorporating this uncertainty at this sort of computational and technical difficulty, or should we just plug along with what we have? And one of the key drivers for that is how much uncertainty is there. And if you're on a factory floor where the machine's performance or a shift's performance or the time it takes somebody to do something is mostly known, the variance is very small, then it's probably easier to just gloss over that and feed it into your schedule or your optimizer or whatever tooling you've got as a point and go with that as the output. But there are tools available. PyMC has some good examples in the example gallery about stochastic optimization, just random variable inputs into optimization. So it's definitely possible, but that's where the computation becomes really, really tricky.
So what do you tell the manager of the two chicken franchises? How do you express the uncertainty to them?
I think if you've done the modeling, you've got your nice outputs where you know different quantiles, it prior to presenting to the distribution center shift manager, whoever it is, if you can understand before you share out results what the trade-offs are, then you can go ahead and make that recommendation. You can say, hey, we recommend 120 cases per month to this location and 95 per month to this location. And like a good analyst, you've done your homework and you've got your assumptions and your modeling outputs in the back pocket if the technical discussion comes to it. So it's all defensible. But it's better to know those trade-offs and be able to make a recommendation than it is to say, here's a complicated modeling output. What are the trade-offs? And I will help you make a decision based on that. Um, as much as you can get away from, as much as you can sort of ask the question preemptively or learn from context preemptively, how costly is it to run out of stock? And if it's a we never ever ever want to run out of stock, then you can, maybe you can pry a little deeper and say, is it worth $50,000 a month to not run out of stock? Is it worth $100,000 a month? So, well, no. If it's only worth 30,000, then you can balance those trade-offs of lost in spoilage versus stock outages, and you can come up with a recommendation based on that. So it's you understand the trade-offs first before you support a decision versus you do a model, then you learn trade-offs, then you support a decision.
This is from Mauricio. He said, your presentation gives very useful and true tips. Say that 5 times fast. I have been away from analysts' work for a long time and I'm fairly rusty, so pardon my ignorance. But do you have any few tips or reading references, besides what's on the screen, or area of study for drawing or estimating probability distributions and parameters?
Okay, great question. I think I'm going to key in on the last sentence. It sounds a bit more technical and analyst side. If you're looking for parameter estimates and probability distributions, I would start with this Statistical Rethinking. It's a phenomenal book. There's some technical code in there. It's written in R, so you could translate to Python if you want to be more useful. But I think that's a great sort of very accessible book to understand probability distribution and the way we think about statistical confidence. If you're sort of more business decision process focused, then I think the Kahneman book and the Savage book. And I'm really struggling to keep up with the chat. You guys are nice and active, but it looks like there's a few other The Lady Tasting Tea. I'm not familiar with that book. But if there's other books that or resources that folks have asked for or have put in the chat, then yeah, feel free to check those out as well.
Yeah, that was from Zohar, who is the chair of our upcoming 2026 Analytics Plus conference, which will be in National Harbor. So we hope everyone checks this out. We'd love to have you there in person. And Mauricio, welcome back. It's a great conference for networking, hanging out with people who have the same sort of mindset and way of thinking that you do. So we'd love to have you. And then next month, we have a webinar on the 23rd, which is applying generative AI in analytics, failure modes and opportunities. That's February 23rd at noon Eastern time. And when you leave this webinar, we will take you to that website to sign up for it. So thank you so much, Evan. This was wonderful. And have a great day, everybody.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much for coming out. Hope you guys got a lot out of it. Feel free to reach out if you want to continue the conversation. Thanks all.